Hey YouTube, it's Dan Angling, the Cousin Dan. Today I'm going to show you how to install lights in the ceiling, but not lights like this, recessed lights. Now in this room, there are no lights in the ceiling. Instead, there's one switch that only breaks the circuit to an outlet that has a lamp plugged into it. What I'm going to do is install some can lights or recessed lights and then use this switch, repurpose this switch to control those lights. Here's how you do it. Here I have laid out some basic tools that you're going to need for this task. A flashlight for when you break the circuit at the circuit breaker so that you can do this safely. A couple of screwdrivers, Phillips and flats, so that you can access the junction boxes and switches and that kind of thing. And then a voltage tester, which really this isn't a voltage tester, it's just simply a current indicator, which will work just fine for me because I know everything in the system is 120. A hammer for installing the recessed lights to the trusses in the attic. A wire stripper, a needle nose pliers, a couple of compasses, which I'm only going to use this big one actually, and the purpose of that is just to draw my 6-inch circles. Some wire nuts, I got a couple different kinds there. A switch in case I find that this one's bad, but that's not necessary 100% of the time. Definitely need a tape measure if you want your lights to be evenly spaced. A drill to start feeding your wires through. You don't necessarily need that if you go right to cutting the 6-inch hole, but I like to pilot the drills. I like to pilot the holes with a drill bit so that I can space them out and then know where I'm at in the attic so I don't have to measure in the middle of all that insulation. You definitely want a respirator of some kind that can filter out particulate in the air if you have blown in insulation, really any kind of insulation. And then if you don't know what circuit you're going to break, you want to have some kind of method of communication. Now I would use a cell phone, but I'm filming on that. So next thing is put on some other kind of clothing that you're totally okay with getting insulation all over. Before I go into the attic, I'm going to measure out on the ceiling from below where I want all the lights. And then I'm going to mark them with a pencil and then pilot them with a drill, go upstairs and cut the bigger holes for the lights. In order to mark out where you want the lights, you really should draw a diagram and you'll be very glad that you did. So in this case, every room is going to be different, so I won't belabor this too much, but in this case I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lights I'm installing. I decided that aesthetically it's going to look best to have them 2.5 feet from the wall in every direction, 2.5 feet, 2.5 feet here. You can see I marked that 2.5 feet. So they're kind of centered in the room. Nothing feels too close to something else or some wall. Secondly, I want to make sure that every light throughout a main area of the room, as much as possible, are equally spaced from each other. So this light is going to be 4 feet 11 inches from this light, and this light is going to be 4 feet 11 inches from this light. Now, why don't I have a light right here? I have a bed right here, and I feel like it's a bad idea to put a light right over top of a bed so that when you wake up and you turn on the lights, it's just shining right down in your eyes. So what I did was the distance from this light to this light is the same as from this light to this light. That way it feels like I'm still following the grid pattern even though this one's missing. Now over here, this is again not drawn to scale as you see here, but over here this light's actually closer to this light than this light is to this one. So 4 feet 11 inches, 3 feet 5 inches. The reason for that is there's a desk right here and it's kind of nice to have them centered a little closer right over top of that desk before you get to the closet wall. And there's a bathroom over here, so you have 1, 2, 3. You would have a 4th light right here, but you just can't do that because that's in the way. So now I'm going to mark them out in real life on the ceiling and then drill the holes. So this is what my mark on the ceiling looks like. Now, if you notice, if I take a compass set to 3 inches and draw a circle when I'm above this, if I drill my pilot hole right there, I will have no place to mount my compass to do the circle. So I'm going to choose an arbitrary direction. In this case, I'm just going to choose south, which is this way. I'm going to drill a hole on each one of these 1 inch to the south. So if I do that, then when I get up in the attic, I just measure 1 inch from the middle of the hole to the north and center my compass, draw the circle, and I'm good to go. You may find that a Sawzall like this is helpful for some drywall cutting situations, but in this case I want the precision of the drywall knife, by the way. You're also going to want some Romex wire. So set that aside. I also have a hanger here, and this hanger is going to be what I stick up through those pilot holes to find what I'm looking for through the insulation. Now, last thing, you always want to have a knife for almost any home project. So I'm going to open this up and see the lights for the purpose of measuring their diameter. See, it's one thing to say on the side of the box that they're 6-inch lights. It's an entirely different thing to go ahead and mark with a compass and cut those holes without actually measuring what those things really are. So I'm going to measure much more precisely what the diameter here is before I cut the holes, so I'm not left stranded with too much of a gap and not enough of a trim covering to cover it, and then I see holes in my ceiling around each light. That's a very undesirable outcome. So what I have here is about 6.5 inches with that black rubber gasket. Here I have 8 inches across the trim, which means that 6 inches is really the opening, not the size of the hole you need. So like I said, the measurement on the outside of the box is not exactly what you need, so always be sure to measure these before you cut your holes. In this case, I wouldn't have cut it too large, I would have actually cut them too small and then had to recut each one, which would be very hard to do once you have cut out the middle and have no place to center your compass. One last note on the light selection. If you have an insulated ceiling like I do with blown-in insulation, make sure that you see IC rated for direct contact with insulation on the box. Otherwise, it could be a fire hazard. So here's my first hole drilled 1 inch to the south, and I'm sticking a coat hanger straightened out up through it. You could use whatever that will fit, whatever you have, and that is so that I can identify where this hole is through all the insulation that's blown into the attic once I get up there. The other thing is you want to know where your studs are. So if you drill a hole right here, and your truss happens to be right here, and you need maybe to here 3 or 4 inches to fit your whole light housing in there, then you want to move this back a little bit so that you have that proper clearance, so you don't end up drilling a hole and making a bunch of marks in your ceiling and then end up going up into the attic and finding that you can't even fit the lights because you mismarked those. Okay, now I'm up in the attic and I have my respirator on, don't forget that. I have found hole number 1. There was a little wire sticking out of that, and that is what I drilled through. You can kind of see the light from the room coming through. So I have my tape measure here. I want to make sure that with a 6.5 inch diameter that I'm shooting for, that I want to make sure this is set to 3 1/4 inches, and that's correct. So then I take the tape measure again and I set it up and measure 1 inch. I'm kind of going to eyeball this 1 inch in the direction that I indicated before, so I was off center. Because see, now I can place my compass where I want it to be, and then spin this thing around and draw a nice circular line. If you don't have one of these, you can get away with a pencil tied to a string. So this is your pencil and you have a string, and then just hold the string in the middle, or put a nail in the middle and tie it to it and go around. You can do that. Okay, now I'm going to have my helper hold a box underneath so don't make a huge mess, and I'm going to cut along this line with a drywall knife. Okay, now that I have the hole cut, I simply take my light and place it right into the hole and line it up along that board there, and then nail these nails into the wall, into the boards. So now that I have the lights in place, I'm going to show you the wiring. So what I've done is right below this hole here where these 3 wires are coming out is the switch to the room. So I'm going to utilize that switch. So I fished this wire down. It came out of the box down there where the switch is mounted. And I ran that wire all the way over into this box in the light, wired it up inside, and then I'm bringing this to my spool, which is then going to run to that light, and then to that light, and the one over there, and so on and so forth. Now, the wiring is basically white to white, black to black, copper to copper. And I'm going to show you right now what that looks like inside of this box. So now I'm at this light. So I've started with that light. I ran the wire down under all this insulation, and it comes out right here. So all you have to do is pull up on this little tab, take the top, take the cover off of your box, and then you see there are these punch outs here. You can push on it with your finger even and just break them out about the size of a quarter, and then you put your wire inside there. But before I do that, I'm gonna take off this insulation and strip the wire. So I've pulled this wire through the opening. Now all I have to do is push it into one of these 4 slots. It is a quick connect. Almost all of them are made like this now. So push that baby in and it's done. No wire nuts or anything. I mentioned wire nuts before
for the purpose of connecting into a box if you need to. But here is not, it is not a requirement. You make very quick work of this with this type of connector. It's a little tougher one-handed, but look at that. Even with just one hand, I'm pushing these babies in, and then I'm done. However, I'm gonna bring it on down to that light. So I'm gonna use one of the other two holes, and I'm gonna put in another jumper to carry it right on over there, and I'll do that throughout all these lights, and then I'll be done, and then I'll show you how to wire it up at the bottom.
So now that I'm out of the attic, you can see the wiring and how it's set up here. So I've pulled this wire down, and this leads to all of the lights, which you can now see coming down out of the ceiling. Okay, the first most important thing that you need to do when you get out of the attic is take a cold shower, because while that wiring is very easy, easier than most wiring, the insulation is terrible, and I'm not going to kid you, it's a terrible job. Okay, so that being said, what I'm going to do is cut these hot wires straight out of this switch, because I want to replace it with a much newer switch. So what we have here is two wires coming down that lead to outlets on the other side of the room. And then this one that has a little paint on it, leads to an outlet that is switched by the switch here to that lamp. So what it's doing is taking this hot line and it's switching it to this other hot line. Meanwhile, all of the commons are together here, or the neutrals. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tie in my neutral in with these, and then put my hot in with the hot that gets switched like that lamp, so that outlet will stay switched, and then I'll put this ground on as well. And before you do that, just find your breaker, kill the breaker, and then do all this work. Okay, I have everything wired up now. Everything's wired inside here, should be to that outlet over there and to all these lights. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They all turn on. Beautiful. And they look like they fit really well. Very nice product. Pretty cheap too. Alright, so if you like this video, there are others like it on the channel, and I am continuing to produce more. Subscribe to the channel, that will be very helpful to me. And if you have any comments or questions, place them in the section below. Also, if you have a more efficient way to deal with insulation, blown-in insulation, post that as well. A lot of people will love you for it. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.